Hello all my Kenvians, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discovering Once Upon a Time. Today the episode that I'm going to be reacting to and reviewing is True North, which, I don't know, based on what happened previously might be the start of not necessarily a different arc, but maybe a tonal shift for the episode, or for the show. I don't really know yet. It's kind of making things up off the top of my head. But anyway, without further ado, I cannot talk today. Let's get into True North. Oh. I see a house in the background. That's weird, it didn't have the intro, like usual. Is that the guy from CSI? Or not CSI, in CSI. One of those shows.
Getting late. We should go.
The one with Abby. Get off. I'm dark and evil. And you are children. Hi, Regina.
What are you doing in my forest? Such a sad and moving story.
Uh-oh.
Guards. Seize them.
It's a what?
Why would... Regina, you make it harder and harder for me to even...
Running from me is foolish.
Kinda, sorta consider you a good person.
Why'd you guys lie to me?
Knew it.
We are your parents.
We don't have any.
These children need a home. I'm just trying to find the best one.
I can't tell if she's lying.
Rob, my father's compass. He gave it to me.
Oh, I have a feeling Hansel's gonna screw all this up, isn't he? Oh dear God, I know I would. I'm a fiend for sweets. Oh, that's gruesome. That's creepy, and yet she's actually kind of hot in a way.
That's your price. Forgiveness. How about tolerance? Well, that's a start. Anything else?
Yes. Nice and tender. Succulent roast you'll make.
Again, creepy and yet hot. I don't know. I'm confused. Oh. Jeez.
I would have gone gravy.
Okay.
Changed his mind. Just like that. Maybe I had a little nudge. I found my father.
Just a little nudge, that's all.
What would that be like? Maybe you'll find out. You can't give up.
Memories, maybe? Perhaps? Nope. Darn it.
I thought you said strangers don't come as far.
They don't.
Huh. Well, that is definitely an interesting note to leave on. So we end with a mysterious stranger. Okay, so, wow. Alright. I, as always, Meleena, am going to, well, and viewers, if she decides to leave this portion in, am going to take a few moments to gather my thoughts and figure out whether or not the one guy is actually the guy I was trying to think of from NCIS. And, yeah, I will be back for the review momentarily. Hi, last second thing I forgot to mention, so Meleena, put this either at the beginning of the review or maybe at the end, I don't know. But the guy that I thought was from NCIS, well, technically I was kind of right, but it's not a main character. It's a guy that's appeared like once on NCIS and then also NCIS LA or Los Angeles, whatever it is. So yeah, technically from that show, but not the person I thought they were. So yeah, just thought I'd put that out there. Bye. Alright everyone, welcome back. It is time for the review portion of this video. And, you know, I just have to say, True North was a very interesting episode. Well, obviously I'm going to go into some of my favorite parts and everything, but it's another one. It's like, I'm not going to say it's one of my favorites. I would say probably like, you know, some of the finales and mid-season finales, things like that are going to probably fall more into my favorites, but just overall, this show just continues to surprise me with its quality overall, especially when it comes to focusing on new characters that haven't been introduced until now. But yeah, let's get into my favorite parts of this episode. Starting with the fact that we meet actual kids in the town. Like, we actually see, and there is dialogue from other kids in this town besides Henry. It only took them 9 episodes. Unless there was, you know, there's been some in the past that I overlooked or whatever, but yeah, I like the fact that we got that. And, you know, the fact that the 2 kids are Hansel and Gretel. Or, I actually forget their names in The Land Without Magic, but, like, you know, their actual names are Hansel and Gretel, and just the fact that we got an episode focusing on those 2. And so yeah, maybe, I guess in a way I was kind of right that the show started to go in a different direction, because again, one thing that really surprised me is that we didn't get an intro for this episode, which had happened in every episode except for the first, unless I'm mistaken. So yeah, that's one aspect that just feels really strange, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they'll develop it and whether or not we'll actually get to meet more kids in Storybrooke, which, given how many kids are in the old fairy tales, I'm sure that'll probably happen eventually. But anyway, moving on to my second favorite part of this episode is the emphasis, well, it's when Regina is talking to Hansel and Gretel and telling them about what they need to do, and the emphasis on don't eat anything. And the way they went about this, I just found it really interesting because of the way that the witch and her house works, which I'll actually touch on that more here shortly. But very sorry about that. Charlie saw someone in the front yard or running in front of the house and decided to bark. Now I have to try and find a way to get back on topic. Just the emphasis on don't eat anything. And again, I'm going to touch more on that whole topic here in a little bit as I get to some of my other favorite parts. But I like how that set up what was to come. But we'll get back to that soon. Moving on to my third favorite part of this episode is when Henry asks about his father, which I feel like overall is something that I haven't really been questioning as the show goes along, because I do keep making references to Emma's past, to Henry's father, sort of subtly. And I haven't really been questioning that too much, I guess. Maybe it's because I've been just assuming that they'll get to that whenever they get to that. The fact that she tells Henry the story that she does and calls him a real hero. Something about the, like, after she told the story, it felt nice. It felt really good. But at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder whether or not she was lying to make Henry feel good. Because everything else, sort of in reference to that, up until this point, made it seem like probably wasn't that great of a guy. Or just like there was something not good about him. So, yeah, I can only assume that the truth will come out at some point. Will probably devastate Henry to a degree, unfortunately. But I am curious to know whether or not it will be a deal where Emma will actually tell Henry the truth, or, oh, surprise, he's here, this is who your dad actually is. Guess we'll have to wait and find out about that. But anyway, moving on from there, the blind witch. I feel like that's not part of the original tale. If I'm remembering incorrectly, though, it may be, but I just remember it being a witch in, the candy/sweet house and all that. But just the entire way that they utilized her and the house, and the sweets in the house even. Like, seemingly she's just completely asleep, like has no register, again, despite being blind, and a lot of blind people tend to have some pretty sensitive hearing, but despite the kids sneaking in and talking, which probably would have alerted someone, but the fact that she has this magical connection to the sweets in her house, which signals to her, well, it wakes her up and it signals to her, okay, well, this is the one I'm going to be eating. I found that really intriguing. And then also, just whoever it was that played the witch, which I'm actually going to look up right now. I don't know if they actually have her in this episode. Emma Caulfield. Oh, another Emma. There we go. Oh, she was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a few other things. Okay, so the fact that I found her attractive, she's a very pretty lady. So the fact that I found her attractive, despite being rather creepy, understandable now. But, yeah, there was just, I really like that whole aspect, and really the whole scene, which, the scene itself is something I'm going to be touching on later. But yeah, I guess I'll just end this portion with, I'm sad that we most likely won't be seeing any more, well, we most likely won't be seeing any more of her because she got all roasty toasty. But, okay, moving on from there, my next favorite part of this episode was Mr. Gold's blank card. The card which he used to read off the father's name of the kids in Storybrooke. It was one of those scenes where this is so consistent with characters like Mr. Gold. But at first I couldn't tell if he was just being legitimate, just being like, oh yes, I do have a card here. But at the same time I was thinking he probably knows who it is in actuality and is using his true memories. Which obviously ended up being the truth there. Unless it's like Doctor Who and the special paper, which, have they actually used that fairly recently? I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, the psychic paper, for a split second I almost thought, maybe it's psychic paper. But no, obviously it was that Mr. Gold was lying and making it seem as if he was finding the name in a normal fashion than what the truth actually is. So yes, Mr. Gold and his blank card. But moving on from there, my sixth favorite part of this episode, this really goes around the kids in general, and it's that the father abandoned them, which one of the versions of the classic fairy tale, unless I'm mistaken, is that the father actually did abandon them in the forest. Or both the father and the mother tried to make it so that the kids wouldn't come home because they couldn't afford 4 people in the house, or something along those lines. But the fact that, first of all, in The Land with Magic, the father didn't abandon them, but was rather kidnapped, was something that honestly I didn't see coming, just because, again, of the way that I remember some versions of the original story being. But then in Storybrooke, at first the father does abandon them. And it's for, real world, kind of understandable reasons, in that he never knew he had kids for years and years and years. So, that's a shock to the system for anyone. But, in Storybrooke, he technically did abandon them. But then we reach the point at the end where, we don't know if they have a happily ever after per se, but the father does go and talk to the kids and takes them in. Who know? The one thing I like about this show is that it leaves things kind of open with situations like this, but at least for now, though, those kids have a happy ending. They don't have to be separated. They're with their father, and the father will get to know them, and they'll get to know the father, which will hopefully lead to good things. But yeah, just the whole father deal in this episode I really found interesting, which is actually kind of appropriate because I'm recording this on Father's Day. So there you go. It was meant to be. But moving on from there, gravy or butter? Or was it butter or gravy? I don't remember exactly. But anyway, yeah, just the whole scene of the kids being in the witch's house and being captured and almost getting cooked. It was a really well done and well executed scene overall. Or maybe it was scenes, because there was some divide there. But overall, just between the acting of the witch, which again was creepy, incredibly creepy, and yet it's still attractive in a strange way. I know I keep saying that, but feel free to judge me, I don't care. But then also the kids and the way that things worked out. I really enjoyed that scene. And then, of course, Regina tops it off at the end by saying, I would have done gravy. And then flambés the witch in the end. I think I actually just came up with an annoyance for this episode that I didn't think about before. I'll touch on that here in a little bit, if I remember it. I don't know. But yeah, just that whole segment of the episode. Moving on from there, my next favorite part of the episode was seeing Snow White with the dwarves. And I'm curious whether or not what we saw in the mirror is something that we will actually see in an upcoming episode. Like whether it was an actual scene from a separate episode, or if it's just essentially an establishing shot to show, okay, at this point in the story, she has met the dwarves. So, yeah, as simple as that is, I really like that, and I'm looking forward to finding out when we might see that scene, or when we'll get to experience more of that particular point in time. So yes, moving on from there, the scene where Hansel and Gretel wake up in the forest, and it's immediately after it's revealed that the father didn't abandon the kids, but he was kidnapped. And so, just this establishing shot of, and I don't know whether it will lead to more stories potentially with Hansel and Gretel, or even maybe with the father trying to find them in the future, but just seeing them walking into this gigantic forest. And at that point, I don't even know whether it's an actual forest in the land of magic, or if maybe it's, for a second, I almost expected it to zoom out and we would see the forest and then it would be like inside a snow globe or something along those lines. Which, given the way the show goes, it's still possible, I guess, but I would like to see maybe a little bit more of their story explored, even if just for a little bit, like part of an episode. But I guess we'll see. It probably won't happen, but it's something I would like to see. Moving on from there, the scene with Emma and Mary, where Emma starts talking more about what Henry actually believes, the way Henry sees things, and mentions that Henry thinks that Mary is Emma's mother, aka Snow White, which obviously in the context of the show is absolutely true. But the way Emma reacts to revealing that information, it clearly affects her, and just gets a whole lot of things turning in her mind that, again, is completely understandable. But then when Mary sees the baby blanket, and just, I kept hoping that there would be like just that spark of remembrance or something along the lines of what happened with the sheriff, or aka the huntsman. But we didn't get that, and that honestly did make me a bit sad, but it gives me this happy feeling knowing that slowly but surely we're approaching the time when the curse might be broken and the truth of all this might be revealed. Keeping the fingers crossed that it'll be soon, because the more of these episodes I watch, the more it pulls me in, and the more and more I'm enjoying this. So yeah, the Emma and Mary scene definitely was a great one. And that brings us to my last favorite part of the episode. Very simple, but the mysterious stranger. And I honestly expected it to, for a second I thought that it was Henry's father, like, come out all of a sudden. But probably, I assume not, maybe? Or maybe that's just a weird assumption on my part. But the fact that he just kind of came in out of nowhere definitely leaves this not necessarily foreboding, but interesting feeling at the end of the episode, which just leaves me wondering, who is this guy? And is the show going to delve into his past the next episode? If they don't, I'm going to be kind of annoyed, but not entirely. But yeah, the mysterious stranger, my final favorite part of this episode. And now moving on from there, time to get into some of my annoyances. Now I did have one annoyance, which is kind of canceled out now because of what we learn about what Regina did. And it was like, why seize the kids? It's like, it just seems so random that these kids that are just in the woods and are seemingly harmless except for the sling that Gretel has, just why all of a sudden guards seize them. But of course then we find out that apparently this was part of her plan, because she had kidnapped the father and was going to manipulate the kids. So there you go. As for actual annoyances with this episode, okay, so apparently I actually don't have any annoyances for this episode. I thought I did, and I remember I mentioned something earlier that I was going to touch on, but at this point I've completely forgotten, so I do apologize. If I remember what it is, I will record an extra segment and send it to Meleena for this video so that she can insert it in, but unless that happens, sorry, yeah. Honestly, not really any annoyances for this episode. It was just overall a really strong episode. And despite the, again, I know I said earlier that it's not one of my favorites, despite the fact that it doesn't have any annoyances, but still, just overall, it didn't feel as strong as some of the other episodes that I have watched. But yeah, okay. So moving on from there, time to get into my quote of the episode. And for me, it was the exchange between Emma and Mr. Gold before he gave her the information on his blank card. And basically, Emma asks what his price is for the information. Forgiveness? How about tolerance? Well, that's a start. That exchange right there just felt so legitimate to me, especially given the two characters' names. And part of me feels like, while it does seem apparent that Mr. Gold can get annoyed by certain people, especially when they sort of, at least seemingly, have something on him or a step up on him, he seems to, there's something about the way he acts or the way he says things that makes it seem like he's enjoying the game. Like, all of this is a game to him, and he's just enjoying it. It's like, forgiveness? Can I be in the clear? How about tolerance? And he's like, okay, that's still a positive for me. And it's just, yeah, like that, for me, that's just such a good quote, that bit of dialogue there. Now, if any of you all have your own favorite quotes, or for that matter, any of your own favorites or annoyances that might have come up and I just don't recall, definitely feel free to voice them in the comments down below. Moving on from there, as far as tracks of the episode or songs, for some reason, nothing in particular really caught my ear as far as tracks go. As always, the music is very good, it's consistent, nothing felt out of place, so maybe that's the best I can say for it. But yeah, just tracks-wise, nothing outstanding, but at the same time, it was good, it was consistent, so thumbs up for the show, as always. But moving on from there, no question, or well, I guess, yeah, it's a question/theory, but the mysterious stranger that appears at the end of the episode. The first thing that came to mind for me after, like, okay, is this supposed to be Henry's dad? But the first, like, true thought I had about this character was, okay, he's by himself, he's on a motorcycle, he's a bad boy, he's a lone wolf. So, could this be the big bad wolf? I don't know. Again, I think I've kind of sort of made that estimate before when it came to the sheriff, which I was obviously wrong on, so could be way off in this regard too, but I'm interested to find out who the character is. Legitimately. And those of you that are watching along with me on this are probably interested to find out as well. So, I will end the episode there. Again, really enjoyed the episode. Not one of my favorites, but just overall it was really solid. And as always, it has me looking forward to the next one, especially with that little cliffhanger there at the end. So until next time, everyone, for the episode called, strangely, 7:15 a.m., I'm sure I'll find out the significance of that. I'm Papa Ken, and I will see you all for the next episode of Discovering Once Upon a Time. Until then, everyone, later.